Welcome back, guys. I'm your host, Monica Velasquez, for the podcast Live for the Journey, and we've been doing this political series, and we're back with Dr. Holcomb. Thank you so much for coming back. We're down one, but it got chilly outside, and he has a cold, which,
okay.
Makes sense. But this is kind of like an update, or not update, like a wrap it all together kind of conclusion to the podcast.
Sure.
And I had some personal questions that maybe will resonate with other people my age or even older, younger. But first, kind of, I know you touched on it a little bit on the last one, what is the importance of voting, and then how do you actually, do that?
Sure. So, I cover this a lot of times in my government class. So on our first day of class, I talk a lot about why is it that they're having to take this course on political science. And then part of that lecture, I talk about why everybody should be engaged with their civic duty and in politics and those types of things. And so one of the things I argue is, since we're at a Christian institution, I argue that I really think it's an obligation of Christians to be involved in the political process, because we're called in Scripture to love our neighbors. We are called to do justice, love mercy, in Micah 6:8, and so it's kind of hard to do those things if we're not aware of what's really going on in the world, and we don't get involved in trying to make things better for people. And so we live in a democracy, and democracy is a great opportunity for individuals to have a voice in the process and try to make the world a better place, make the country a better place. And the key way of doing that is through the political process. And so I think there's kind of a religious justification or obligation to do that. So that's one. Another is we are a democracy that means the citizens participate in government. We're not a democracy if people don't do that. And so then it's really low obligation in the United States. The only thing you're really asked to do as a citizen is show up every now and then, usually maybe once every 2 years, on one day, and go press some buttons, and that's it, and vote. So it's all that's really expected of you in our democratic society, and so I don't think it's asking too much for people to get informed and to get involved and cast their ballot, on election day. The other is, I think I mentioned this last time we were together, that this is maybe a self-interested approach. So we've got the religious argument to do it. There's sort of this citizenship, democracy argument. But the other argument is, listen, government affects you. Everything you do every day is touched by government in one way or the other, whether it's a law or regulation or student financial aid or whatever it might be. That's you cannot escape government on a daily basis. I would say even on an hourly basis or either. And so out of your own self-interest, you ought to have a voice in that process in terms of who's going to be elected and determining what kinds of rules, regulations, laws that I'm going to have to live by or might impact me in some specific way. And it could be, from a student's perspective, everything from how much financial aid is going to be available, is it going to cover my college costs, or the interest rate I'm going to pay on my student loans, all the way down to, am I going to have adequate and clean water supply? Are we going to have enough police officers to show up if there's an emergency? Am I going to get assistance if there's a natural disaster? I mean, these things we kind of take for granted that government does for us on a daily basis. And so I think it's in our own self-interest to get involved and help sort of shape what those policies and those benefits are going to be. So those are a few arguments as to why you should, and because we really do have a crisis, and I get why people get tired of the candidates and the mudslinging and the negative campaigning and all that kind of stuff, but we can't really have a democracy if people don't get involved, and we can't improve things if you don't get involved. So sometimes you got to hold your nose and go and figure out what's going on and determine who's the best candidate or what the best position is, and go vote for those things.
So the process of voting, is it pretty simple?
Very, very simple. So again, we make it pretty easy for
I've
you.
never
So,
done it before.
and, well, here's your chance. Okay. So now I'm finding more of my students are registered to vote because now you can do that when you get your driver's license and those types of things.
That makes sense, honestly.
But to register for the November 5th election, you should have. You had to have been registered by now. It's about a month. A couple of weeks in advance. And then if you're a student here, you're not living near your home, you needed to have requested an absentee ballot, and that has to be done a bit early. But if you can go home to vote, or if you can vote here, if you're from this area and it's easy for you to get to your polling place, then you can go during the 2-week early voting period, which starts, I'm pretty sure, next Monday. So for 2 weeks before the election, you can go to the county office and cast your ballot anytime 8 to 5 for 2 weeks.
Okay.
And then if you don't get in during early voting, election day is Tuesday, November 5th. You will have a polling place in your precinct. That's the area of the county in which you live. And there's a polling place that you can just Google and find out and just show up sometime between 7 and 7 and vote. And bring your registration card or at least an ID with you and you'll be able to cast your vote.
Okay.
So it's pretty
simple.
easy.
Yeah.
They hand you a ballot and you take it to a little booth. They have a little privacy and you go through and you now it's all computerized. You put it in and you press the buttons next to the names of the people you want to vote for.
Okay. I do have one of those register cards things. So you just take. I know my mom's like you have to sign it and like go or go vote. With it. So I don't even remember. I think you can get registered online, right? And
you can. Well, yes, you can. You can fill out the form online. I think you have to send it in though.
Okay.
I may. It may be more updated.
It may be
online than that, but I'm pretty sure last time I checked, you can access the form online. But the fact that you've got to sign it might mean you have to mail it in or drop it off.
Okay.
So probably something I need to get up on
Yeah.
speed with. But yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that because you can find out all the information you need about registering, getting absentee ballots, that kind of stuff, mail-in ballots, in other words, if you don't live near your polling place. At the Secretary of State's website in Texas. So Google Secretary of State Texas because the Secretary of State is the chief elections officer in the state of Texas. So that's one good website. Another one that I've been telling my students about is the League of Women Voters is a nonpartisan group whose goal is to educate voters and encourage people to get engaged in the political process. So they've got a website called Vote411.org, and you go in and you click a button about how to register and it gives you all the information. You get another one about the candidates and you can even put in your address and it'll show you everything that will be on your ballot.
Oh, okay.
So this is the other thing that often happens. We're so wrapped up in Kamala Harris versus Donald Trump, the presidential election, understandably, because that's what we're inundated with. The reality is a lot of statewide and other elections going on, and most people don't take the time to educate themselves about those. And they go in the polling place and they're like, well, I knew I was going to have to vote for one of these two, but there are 8 other elections going on, including one of our Senate races and State Board of Education, judicial races, all that. So the League of Women Voters gives you information about those candidates so you can make an informed decision, or at least gives you enough information where you can Google some more too.
Yeah, because I was looking into that because my aunt told me, she's like, this is all I've done. I press it for like, say she's right or left, I'll press just left for everyone. And I'm like, is that, can you choose others? And she's like, yeah, but like I don't want to deal with it. And I'm like, okay.
Well, there's always the possibility, if you feel very strongly about your political party, there's the straight ticket voting. You vote for all the Democrats or vote for all the Republicans all at once, and you don't have to go through. But I think I mentioned this last time we were chatting. In many ways, it's the local races and the state races that impact our daily lives more so than even the presidential race. So all the more reason to get informed about those too.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Okay.
So since the last time we had you on, we've interviewed someone from the right and the left, and it gave me some insight on. I also did some research on Trump's and Harris's policies and things like that, and it just left me discouraged. Honestly,
Okay.
It's like I don't know if like it's like. It doesn't even feel like the lesser of two evils. It just feels like.
So you weren't happy with.
So I wasn't. Okay. Which I don't know what I expected.
Right.
But I think this is kind of be a side tangent, but like the way social media portrays it, and I watched like 10 minutes of the debate, the presidential debate. I'm like, this is just entertainment. This is not like you're not actually answering the questions. You're not actually being respectful towards one another. This is like a game. And I think that's why maybe a lot of people feel like politics isn't important, because the way certain things are portrayed in the media, which I know is out of our control. But also, is there any like encouragement or advice for people who are just seeing solely media and maybe, different avenues they could look at?
Sure. No, I mean, I think completely understandable, and it makes me want to change one of my answers I just gave.
Okay.
We do make it extremely easy to vote and exercise your citizenship that way, but it does take some work to weed out all of the sound bites and hyperbole and those types of things, and get down and into the weeds and educate yourself on the positions of the parties and the real positions and parties of the candidates. Because, and this is sort of an indictment on the American people, but campaigns are going to stick with the non-answers and the personal attacks and the exaggerations and the mischaracterizations and the lies and all that, because they know it works. Yeah. They know the average American does not want to spend a lot of time reading and trying to figure out what do these people really think. They know that they're going to vote based upon their impression of that candidate. So if you can create a negative impression of that person, you're more likely to either keep somebody from voting for them or getting somebody to vote for you. So that's why we get all the negative and and evasiveness and all that kind of stuff, especially in debates, especially with kind of this soundbite of the day on social media. But I do think there's information out there that you can go to. So both parties produce what are called platforms every presidential election year. And so you can look up Republican Party platform, Democratic Party platform, and you can read what are our basic positions on the key issues facing the United States. Everything, economy, immigration, abortion, whatever it might be. So that's one place to go to at least cut through some of the smoke and get a little more information. And then I think the major news outlets do produce articles about what are the candidates' positions on certain issues, and so that cut out some of the political talk coming directly from the candidates themselves, and so that's another one that I would like. I was just reading today Associated Press report on what are the candidates' positions on the major issues. And that didn't go into great detail, but at least I think that's a place to start. So you'd be at least a little more informed about what the positions of the candidates are. And then if you think you're reading something that sounds a little biased or over the top or whatever, the Annenberg Center at the University of Pennsylvania in their School of Journalism, they have a fact check publication or actually website they come out with. I think it's just factcheck.org you can go to, and you can it'll tell you it's bipartisan. I mean, it's nonpartisan. It will indicate, so and so said this during an interview or a debate or whatever, and it'll parse through those and sort of tell you what's not truthful and what is. And so, I mean, it's unfortunate a lot of it is just focused on negativity, but to some degree, unfortunately, they know that where we get our news is just looking at little sound bites and clips and reels and TikTok and all this, and that's not really the place to be informed. It'd be nice, though, if they could
use it properly.
And just have a reasonable conversation about the issues. But you can dig down a little deeper and find out what those are. The other caveat, though, is candidates are going to make a lot of promises during the election season just to try to get your vote, and we don't know how all that's going to work out or get paid for or whatever it might be. So you have to take some of the positions with a grain of salt.
Yeah.
But you can certainly find differences, and that's really what you're looking for, is how does Harris or the Democratic Party differ from the Republicans and Trump on some of these issues, and that's where some of those articles can be helpful to you.
Okay. Yeah, I think it's really easy to get discouraged because you're not looking in the right direction. It's really easy to see, like, it just looks like a bunch of arguing, and it's like, I guess it's kind of like, it is, like you said, back to us, it is our duty. They do make it very simple, but if you really care, you would put in a little bit more research than that, I guess. Yeah,
and it's just part of the things we have to deal with as voters. As we know, the campaigns, they're out to demonize their opponent, and because they want to put in the back of your mind a negative impression of that person. They don't want to inform you about the issues. They want to, and because that's effective, and so it's really our job to dig a little deeper. I would say of all years, of all elections, this would be one where your vote really does matter, though, because now, especially so if you lived in one of those 6 really contested states, but even in Texas, down the ticket, positions and parties mean things, and there are a lot of close elections. The presidential election is going to be very, very close, especially. But we may have some surprisingly close elections in Texas too. Republicans are going to do very well. Don't get me wrong. Yeah. But there are 1 or 2 that have surprised people that they're as close as they are, and so. But definitely at the presidential level, every vote's going to matter. It's amazing how we could have, close to 150 million or more votes cast, and about 20 to 30,000 might mean the difference in who gets elected president. So
that's crazy.
So in that respect, I think, again, this means more depending which state you live, but every vote does impact the system.
So what advice would you give calling myself out? Like someone who feels like it just, I don't know, meaningless in a way.
Right.
I know you already went through this spiel of like researching and stuff like that. So is there like any other maybe advice for someone who feels like they just can't like seem to agree on either side?
Right. Well, there's what I would do, first of all, again, I'm being a little repetitious here, but educate yourself a little more about the individuals and the issues. The other thing, though, is I might take it sort of a self-interested approach. So what are the most important issues to you as a college student?
Okay.
Then go through the parties' positions and think, okay, how might this impact me as a college student, or as somebody who's going to be looking for a job in a few years, or maybe somebody who's got student loans, or whatever the situation that you might be in, and kind of look at it through the lens of your own circumstances, because that's how most people do it. And then the other is more altruistic, and again, it kind of goes back to the faith thing, is which policies, which parties really reflect the common good, reflect caring for your neighbor, for the least of these. A lot of it's something people don't see. People are pretty comfortable looking out for their own self-interest, but what if we actually looked towards what is best for the people as a whole? What's in the best interest of those who are weak and powerless, and all those people that we're called to look out for in Scripture?
Going back to what we were discussing, I do think it is, the way you broke that down made me be like, okay, stop worrying about the individual themselves and worry about what is the lasting impact. Because all of us, we're not perfect, so at the end of the day, their lives are publicized, And if my life was publicized, I would probably be viewed as a great person from time to time.
Sure.
So and especially with politics, I think one reason why people feel like they just can't go into that realm, because it just feels like a lot of anger and hatred. And then tying it back to the faith, there's people that are angry at the faith, there's people that portray it wrong, there's this and this and that. But at the end of the day, I can only control myself. And if I could help someone else, and maybe you can't please everyone. Like in scripture, what is it? I forgot. It's more like please God, don't please man. I don't remember the verse verbatim, but like, what are you doing? Why are you doing these things? Is it solely because you want people to see you and fit in? And I think that's why culturally and faith, it doesn't clash, because it's not about you in a way.
Right. No, I think you've expressed it well, and it's not our natural instinct
No.
to think, oh, how did this policy serve the common good, or my fellow citizen, or the weak, or the poor, or whatever it might be. But I think that's kind of our calling, particularly as Christians, is that should be our instinct, rather than how does this help me, how does this hurt me, but rather does it serve the common good. But we do have this really strong individualistic instinct in the United States. We need to help ourselves, take care of ourselves, that kind of stuff. And the government, to the extent that we have government doing stuff, it should be freeing us to move up the social ladder, or whatever the situation might be. But I don't know that it's always consistent with what we're called to do as Christians too, which is to how do we orient ourselves in a way where we're thinking of others first rather than our own interest. And the nastier the politics and the more fear is injected into the rhetoric and all that makes it even harder, right? And so I get the hesitancy and the and really apathy that exists, particularly among younger voters. But at the same time, I think in some ways it just means you got to roll up your sleeves and work a little harder and figure out, look at those policies a little more carefully, and then see how they impact not just you but others as well.
I think it makes it a little bit easier if you just solely see it in that lens, and regardless of who it is or who it isn't, because at the end of the day, there'll be another president. There'll be another this. There'll be another that. So what is in your life in these 4 years are you most likely to put up with, I guess?
Right.
If it's only for you and also others, But,
Well, and I think, I teach political science, but I also teach history. And the nice thing about being able to put on the historian's hat is if you just looked at everything in its current context, it would be easy to get very anxious, very upset, very depressed, very apocalyptic. The world's coming to an end in some ways, right? But I like to put on my historian's hat and say, we've survived some really serious trauma and crisis in our nation's history in the past. And the country held together. Good things happened eventually. Things were accomplished. And so I do think there's significant things at stake in this election that we should take seriously, and there is there are some who are really concerned about the future of our democracy in some ways.
Oh, really?
And I think there's some legitimacy to that concern. I don't want to minimize what's going on, but at the same time, I think we got to look at it in the big picture, as you were saying, because each side's going to try to tell you the other side's out to destroy the world or America or whatever. That's been used every election since the beginning of our nations, ever since we had our first contested presidential election. Some of that is just to scare you, to get you to vote for the other side. So serious issues at stake, but look at the big picture. Don't succumb to fear and anxiety to where it paralyzes you from getting involved or engaged in a process.
All right. Well, that's all questions I had. Did you want to add anything, or?
No, I would just say I think it's great you all are doing this. Hopefully it'll spark some interest and involvement among the student body, because we know voting patterns historically are the lowest among traditional college-age students, and voting patterns, the participation increases with age. So what this means to me is there's a lot of potential for traditional college-age students to have a huge impact on elections, because they're kind of the silent group out there. They don't always get that involved, and if they did, it could make a huge difference in the political system.
All right. Well, thank you so much for coming on and informing us about politics.
Well, it was good to be with you. I appreciate the invitation.